Hey, it's Nora. Before we get started, we need to make sure that you, the listener, knows that we are not mental health professionals and not qualified to prescribe therapies or therapeutic advice. We are also not your gurus and have no aspirations in that direction. We are simply two people who are trying to feel better and do better in our lives, just like you. And now, on with the show.
What's up, Paul?
What's up, Shamalama Ding Dong? How are you?
I love your weekly word for who I am. How are you?
I'm good. I got to make up a new nickname every time. All right, it's podcast meeting time.
All right. What are you thinking this week?
Well, one that I've wanted to do for a while, I think, and what we should do is I want to talk about imposter syndrome this week, yeah?
Who the hell do you think we are? You think we're qualified for this shit?
Oh, a big podcast. I was going to talk about imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah. Look at me. I know everything.
I'm so good. I'm not an imposter at all. No, you know what I'm talking about. It's so pervasive.
Yeah.
I think, we're going to do it, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. We'll try and get through it. Muster the courage. We can do this. We're good enough. We're smart enough. Okay.
And doggone it, people love us.
People love us. All right. I'll see you. I'll see you on Thursday. Okay.
All right. Later, dude. Bye.
Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same.
Imposter syndrome is one of the most universally experienced blocks to our personal development there is.
It's that nagging doubt that you aren't equal to the task. The feeling that you aren't smart enough, pretty enough, skinny enough, strong enough, or just enough, period.
Today on the show, we're talking about imposter syndrome. Where do we get it? How does it affect us? And how do we overcome it? In this episode, Paul and I are going to break down our own experiences of imposter syndrome and what we've tried to do to mitigate its effects on us. And hopefully you can use that information to help guide you out of your own experience of feeling like a fraud. So if you're ready for takeoff,
let's go. Okay, Nora, it looks like we're going to tackle a big beast today on the show, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm-hmm. I know that we've both suffered from imposter syndrome in nearly everything that we've ventured to do. And so let's get into that a little bit right off the top. Oh, what's an experience from your life where imposter syndrome was threatening to bring you down?
Oh, there are so many.
I know, right? Really, it's hard. It's a gallery of imposter syndrome.
I mean, can I start with today? Or no, one experience that stands vivid in my mind was in 2000. I was in a dance company. I was about 25 years old at the time, and I was in a dance company that we were rehearsing all the time. And being asked into that dance company, I was kind of like, why do they pick me? You know? Why do they want me?
Immediate imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Immediate. Yeah. Right. And we were scheduled to perform at Catalina Ballroom on Catalina Island, outside an island off the coast of Los Angeles, for this big dance camp, as nerdy as that sounds.
Well, as for those of you who don't know, Catalina Ballroom is one of the biggest unsupported roofs in the United States. It's a huge ballroom. It takes you about 3 minutes just to walk acrost the dance floor. I mean, it's a massive place filled with people. Yeah, during this camp.
Yeah, and so the whole reason this dance company kind of came together, like the other people I was in this dance company with, was specifically to perform at this ballroom, this event that, Paul, you were the MC.
Yes,
I don't know if
was.
you remember.
I do remember. Yes.
Yes, and so there were like hundreds of dancers like out there, and before we were supposed to perform, I started to have a panic attack and could not calm myself down and was freaking out. And thank God for my friend Belinda, who took me aside and basically told me to get my shit together before we were about to debut. Yeah. So I kind of pulled it together the best I could, went through the choreography. It felt like a blur because, I just kind of went on autopilot. I'm sure I screwed some stuff up, but whatever. And as soon as we finished, I just remember everyone kind of erupting into like applause, and your face, you running over to us with this giant, like, so excited, like, oh my God, that was amazing.
It was amazing.
And it was one of the, well, thank you. We worked very, very hard at it. And, I had totally felt like a fraud at that, going into that performance, because I couldn't see the forest for the trees. It was like, I didn't grow up as a trained ballerina or anything like
Yeah.
that. It was like I learned how to swing dance in
Yeah,
bars.
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And then, I was surrounded by people who had danced their whole lives, and, then there was me out on the floor, but, that was kind of like one of many, many episodes of imposter syndrome that I kind of fought my way through.
Yeah, man.
How about you?
Well, I just want to. I'll piggyback on the performance thing because performance
Mhm.
is such a trigger for my imposter syndrome. I mean, I performed as a MC, as a dancer, as a improv person. I used to be on an improv team, and we do shows all the time. But on the first few gigs, I was so nervous, man. Like in life, I'm a big fan of improvisation. That's what the audience should know right away, right? In general. And I think that,
Yes, and.
yeah, yes. And I think that some of the most magical things to ever happen were inventions in the moment. That goes for like music,
Mhm.
dance, comedy, all that stuff. But when you're tasked with flying by the seat of your pants and there's no script and no direction, it can be terrifying when you first start to do it, right? Before
Mhm.
you really have the trust in the rest of your team. If you're a new team, it's hard to trust that everybody's going to pick you up at the first time. So you go through all
Right.
that stuff though, I'm not quick enough, I'm not funny enough, all that bullshit that your little voice tells you inside your head. And what broke the spell for me was one show where I had the first line on stage. I walked out and my friend Brett was playing a hot dog vendor on stage. He was just sitting there making hot dogs, and I walked up and I asked him for a char-broiled hot dog by mistake, and I meant to say char-broiled, which is something from my childhood, but said broiled instead, and it got a huge laugh because they then explained like the concept of broiling was to boil, grill, and then
Kinda went with
and
it.
yeah, I just went with it, and it ended up being the basis for the rest of the entire piece, right? So in every scene, somebody
Oh,
was
wow.
asking for a broiled something, and somebody was confused about it, and it just became this running joke through the whole thing. So, it kind of taught me to incorporate my mistakes like I did on the dance floor
Mhm.
into the improv thing as well, and just run with it, just yes and myself,
Yeah.
basically the whole time, and
Yeah.
just go forward, fearlessly with that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, and you go on.
Yeah.
But performance and artistic endeavors are just one sort of facet of the imposter syndrome, and I don't want to spend the whole time on that. It shows up for so many people at work, at home, at church,
Mhm.
and really anywhere where we doubt our gifts or skills or talents. And if you
Yeah.
think you're alone in this, man, you aren't. Michelle Obama, Albert Einstein, Meryl Streep of all people has talked about.
I
I think
know.
the quote is like, why would they want to see me act again? I was like, are you kidding me right now, Meryl Streep?
That's comforting to me, though,
Yeah, it is comforting to me too.
it is comforting to know I'm not
Yeah, they
alone.
all have it, and they have it. You can start to
Yeah.
see how pervasive it is, and
Yep.
how easy it is for all of us to have it, right? So,
Yeah. I was gonna say that one of the things that I even notice about myself that I really like I'm getting better with it, but, I've been dancing for over 25 years
mhm,
at this point, like 25
yeah,
plus, and I've been in a dance company where we rehearsed for, like, 7 days a week at some points,
mhm.
and I've, choreographed, and I've taught, and I've competed, and I've done all these things through the years, and if someone's like, "Oh, are you a dancer?" I still sometimes struggle to say yes.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like just because I didn't go to Juilliard,
yeah.
and, it's just like the comparison, I guess, or I don't know, but yeah, I definitely struggle with it
Yeah,
still. It's
I
crazy.
always had that during my dance career too, until we were in Sweden one time teaching, and we walked into a bar in Stockholm before we ever went out to the camp where we taught, and the bartender says, "Well, you guys dancers?" And we were like, "What? We're just dressed in
Mm,
street clothes, I'm like, "How could you tell?" And
mhm.
she goes, "Oh, you walk like dancers." And I was like,
Well,
"Cool."
well,
I
well.
was like, "That is awesome. You're like, you made my day, lady. That's incredible." Like, I didn't say anything to her, no information. "Ah, you
That's
walk
cool.
like dancers." And I thought, okay, maybe I can claim that now. Maybe I can
You're
claim that.
strutting
Yeah. Not
strutting
just strutting,
around.
but
That's
they just
cool.
thought she just thought our posture looked like we were dancers, which it did at the time. But
Hey, they'll take that win.
yeah, take the win. Take the
Yeah.
win. So, but let's talk about where it comes from, right?
Okay.
Where
Yeah.
does imposter syndrome start, Nora?
I mean, and this isn't like a comprehensive research
Of
on
course,
where imposter
we're going
syndrome,
for, as
but
usual, folks. We are going for our own experience. We're talking from our own experience here, right? We're
yes,
not.
yeah.
We're this is not research we're talking about right now.
No, but I would say that, part of where it comes from is your environment, and that could be
Hmm.
like your social environment or your family environment. And it goes hand in hand with perfectionism.
Yeah.
And in our culture, especially now with like everything online, we have these demands to be quote unquote perfect 24/7. And that can, I know for me, that can lead me to freeze up a lot of
Yeah.
times. So, or like just like kind of, yeah. And if we look at cancel culture, my God,
Oh yeah, man.
it's like so many people are holding ourselves back because we're afraid of being ostracized. And that's like one of the worst things a human can experience is to being cut off from the
Yeah,
tribe.
separated from the
And
group. Yeah, man. 100
yeah, it's a literal survival mechanism.
100%. It used to be that when
Mhm,
you failed publicly, it was usually in front of a small group of people, right? Before YouTube and social media and all
mhm,
that stuff. And you could always think to yourself, well, I'll never see them again, so who cares, right? But now
right.
with YouTube and social media, the risks associated with public failure are a million times higher. And that's what all these kids are
No.
experiencing, let alone us, as
Mhm.
adults. If you fail once and in a way that broader society deems unacceptable, you could be cut off from the group, forever. Those videos last forever.
Yeah. I can't even imagine having a childhood and especially like my teenage years of having a camera in front of my face
Yeah,
24/7
no.
or just knowing that everyone's got a camera that can video you or put you on like a live social network. All the things, the dumb stuff I did to be forever on the internet
Yeah.
with
I
comments
I
section.
mean, the
No.
other thing I can't imagine is, like, being a kid and also having to build a brand at the same time, which is what all these
Oh
kids are
god,
doing,
it's exhausting.
right?
It's all performative stuff, right?
Right,
We're performing their lives rather than, like, being authentic and figuring out who they
right.
are, right? And I don't know, that's a very difficult thing I really feel for kids
Me
today,
too, me too.
growing up in this culture.
Yeah.
We were kind of the last generation to kinda have that feral childhood um, that was not being recorded.
Yeah.
Like, there's barely any photos of me as a kid because I was the last of the children. It was like, "Oh, yeah, there's Nora in
Yeah.
the background
We're not
somewhere."
paying for development for another one.
No.
There's, like, 4
Yeah.
already. What do you want? Yeah.
Well, you can have a pet turtle and it's got its own Instagram account. It's like, and I probably will follow that pet turtle too,
100%.
but,
I'm all about the pet
I follow
turtles.
all the
Me
dogs.
too.
But yeah. Yeah, but, the other thing I was gonna say, even outside of social like, society, culture and
Yeah.
society, family culture too, and I'll speak directly from my experience. Part of, like, my family culture and maybe, like, probably Irish culture in general is, like, you don't get too big for your britches,
Yeah.
right? Like, there's a humility and humbleness is valued.
Yeah.
And so to kind of, like, accept accolades kind of felt even if I worked hard at it, always felt like if I really embraced that or if I was, like, yeah, accepted that maybe I had some skills or a gift,
Yeah.
it felt like it was me being braggadocious
Mhm.
or like
Mhm. Yeah.
egotistical. And that was something I always wanted to avoid. Like I don't like being really in the spotlight. I don't know, there's just that kind of needy energy. I'm just not into
Uh-huh.
it.
Yeah.
It kind of exhausts me. But like I think there's just like something in my brain that like feeling like I can accept accolades and just it's taken me a long time to just get comfortable with where I am now with it.
Yeah.
And I think it really stems from a family environment.
Family
Like
environment.
I'll say
Yeah,
that.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was laughing because I read something about Cillian Murphy,
Uh-huh.
who, he got an Oscar for
Oppenheimer. Yeah.
Oppenheimer. Is that correct? I don't follow this stuff really, but and I was laughing because his parents, there was like an interview with his parents and his parents in Ireland who were like, "Oh yeah, it's just Killian. We're not going to the Oscars. He'll come back here. We'll have tea together.
Yeah.
It'll be fine." It's just
Totally.
like, I was like, "Oh man, do I
Yeah, they're
understand
totally like
that
that.
kind of
Yep.
family culture?" Like big Hollywood guy, whatever, and I'll
Whatever.
go out and milk the cow.
Right?
You know?
You come home. Don't expect me
Yeah,
to do your laundry, just because you got an
exactly,
Oscar. That's
exactly.
funny. Yeah, I would just add on to that. Like, you also grew up in a Catholic context, but in like an
Hmm.
there's a lot of sort of church trauma that goes on too that adds on to the
Oh yeah.
imposter syndrome. And in the evangelical bits of Christianity, there's like this acronym called JOY that means Jesus, others, and then yourself, right? And that is like the
Mm,
order that you should pay attention to things in, right? And I think that does
yeah.
a lot of damage in terms of not believing in yourself, or not making yourself a priority, and then that
Yeah.
can also lead to imposter syndrome as well.
Well, and also as a woman too,
Yeah,
it comes from every
yeah,
environment in our society, I
yeah,
think. And yeah, there's it's learning the difference between being actually confident or arrogant.
yeah,
And there is a difference,
yeah,
So it's just making sure that I'm not coming off
Yeah,
arrogant
you got to
at any
stand. You
point,
got
or
to
that I'm
find
not.
that
Yeah,
balance in the middle there. Yeah.
exactly,
All right.
exactly.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how imposter syndrome manifests in us. So we have a little
Mm,
list we're going to go down here and talk about. The first one we have on our list is discounting our own success, or feeling that your
mm-hmm,
accomplishments are due to luck or external factors rather than your own abilities. Right. And this
mm-hmm,
one, I realized early on that nobody really does anything by themselves. If
mm,
there's no even if there's no direct collaboration, a person's influences and environment and conditioning all combine in whatever the product is. But there's no reason. Even though that's true, there's no reason I can't claim and celebrate my part in making something happen. And I think people are really resistant to that. Like endless self-deprecation, playing small, doubting your abilities is exhausting, man. Not to mention it pisses off everyone around you that can clearly see how talented you are. It's
yeah,
annoying,
yeah,
and there's
yeah,
nothing wrong with saying I made that happen. You can claim it, you can celebrate it, and then you got to move on, right? You don't want to dwell on your
mm-hmm,
failures or your successes. You've got other shit to do, right?
yeah.
You can just call it there.
Yeah, and also, again, everyone feels imposter
Yeah.
syndrome
Yes.
at least one point in their
Yeah.
life, if not often.
Yeah.
So, just we got to keep that in mind. And then it's just like shame. So, imposter syndrome eases its grip on us when we become aware of it. That's always like the first step,
Hmm.
right? Is awareness,
Yeah.
and then you have to acknowledge it. You have to like be aware of it and be like, "Oh, I see you," and then talk about it
Mhm.
because, like, I think it eases it. It's like shame, and when you talk about it with other people and you find that like, oh, you feel the same too, then there's like a shared experience, and you don't feel like the odd one out,
Don't you
right?
think that's the way with just everything though, man? Like it's all
Yeah,
about
but it's hard to be
exposing. Yeah, it's
vulnerable,
all
you
about
know?
shining a light on it though, and you got to
Yeah.
find somewhere that's safe so you can do that. Yeah.
Yep.
No, I like that, Nora.
Yeah, and you gotta, as always, you gotta practice self-compassion,
Yeah.
right? And like you have to accept that you do belong, and that you deserve success,
Yeah.
and that your hard work deserves acknowledgement. And I've been trying to consistently remind myself of all this as we've like prepped and launched this
Yeah,
podcast.
right.
So it's like, this is just one of the many ways it manifests in me. And is this podcast perfect? Am I perfect at it? No. Do I feel qualified? Mostly no. But is it authentic? Yes.
Yeah.
This is like authentically what I think and my take
Mhm.
on these things. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I have found that like there are two questions that really like kind of facilitate the self-compassion in
Mhm.
me. And one of them is the question is, do I believe I'm worthy of love and acceptance as I am?
Mm.
And the second is, do I need to be perfect in order for others to approve of me?
Uh-huh.
And so when I ask myself those things, I intellectually will know, like, yes, of course I'm worthy of love and acceptance. And yes, it's just getting to the emotional part of that,
Yeah.
understanding and, practicing that, but keeping that in the right in front of me, those questions, like kind of keep it in front of me
Yeah.
to help me through
This is the toughest part for a lot of people. I know it was for me, and it continues to be a challenge. Really, I say was, but all these things are. It's never over. There's a lot to deal
it.
with from your childhood and other places. But it's hard to give yourself a pep talk if you don't think you're worthy of one. That's one of the main issues. And so many issues we have stem from our lack of self-love, I think. And I found that I really had to get that together first, and then everything else started to come easier because self-love is the basis for success in so many of our mental struggles. And when you become a fan of yourself, and it even makes me uncomfortable to say that right now. I'm like a fan of myself. Oh, I'm such a fan of myself.
My OnlyFans
But it's
page,
true.
it's
Like
just me. No.
when you befriend yourself and become a fan
Mhm.
of you, it definitely deflates that feeling of imposterism. We are all worthy of love and acceptance, but sometimes we're the last ones to acknowledge that. And I think that's got to change before you can really make progress in personal development of any kind. Like this is central to so much of what I do. Like this piece is one that I'm
Mhm.
always working on and always trying to make a better friend of myself than I was yesterday.
Yeah, I dig that. I dig that a lot. There was everything you said absolutely, by the way. Like I just want to acknowledge that. And again, a lot of it comes back to me like I can intellectually know something, but then I'm like, but do I emotionally know
Yeah,
that?
right.
And that's where the work is
Yeah.
for me,
Yeah.
right? So, I mean, there is that. One of the things I remember having this conversation with a cousin of mine about something related to imposter syndrome and accepting, like the self acceptance. And one of the things one of the things practices I thought of to help himself and myself through this stuff is like is to think of like that like that voice that tells you you're not enough
Mhm.
as if it's talking to like a 5-year-old,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
right? Like your 5-year-old
Yep.
child and like step in.
Yeah.
Have your adult self step in and be like push back on that
Mhm.
is really what it comes down to. Because you would never talk to a kid like that. And if you do, oh my God, that's terrible. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's have the compassion for the inner child is really what it boils down to. Of you deserve love and acceptance.
Yeah. Love that. Love
Yeah.
that. Okay. On to fear of failure, shall we? Constantly worrying about
Sure.
making mistakes or not meeting expectations, leading to perfectionism and anxiety. All right, so
Mm-hmm.
this one I have the most of, I think. It used to absolutely paralyze me, really, because perfectionism is my biggest bugaboo. It's a familial thing. It's from my childhood. I've been working on it pretty hard for the past couple of years, but it's rough, man, because I'm a detail-oriented guy, and I think being detail-oriented coupled with fear is like the gateway to a hobbling perfectionism. It's like this is this is also the one that manifested itself in my high school students most often as well, right? Their fear and perfectionism were off the charts. I mean, it's much worse for the kids coming up now than it was for me. And they would routinely not want to try something if they didn't feel like they'd be immediately good at it. And it was heartbreaking most of the time. And it taught me a lot about my own perfectionist tendencies. Now I'm trying to just make good work now. And I focus on authenticity instead of perfection. And I started that in earnest one day. I'm a big Elvis Costello fan, and always have
Mm-hmm.
been. And I was listening to a couple of demos that he did before his first record came out, and it was just him and a guitar in some crappy, echoey bedroom somewhere in London, and and a subpar recording equipment for sure. But there was something about the raw power of it and the musical ideas in the stripped back environment that knocked me back, and it gave me a whole different take on the songs than the ones that I knew and loved. They were miles from perfect, but they were beautiful, man. And I think if he had cleaned them up or recorded them in the studio, they would have lost their magic a bit. And creativity is funny like that. Some things can stand a little polishing, and some things are better left untouched. And the trick is not overdoing it in either direction. And that's what it kind of taught me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just make the thing as best you
Yeah.
can, and then let go of it.
Yeah. I really love that.
Yeah.
That's huge because it makes me think about like would we auto tune uh like a blues singer?
No,
That would be ridiculous, right? Like,
no, it's
you
all
know,
that. It's all that funkiness. It's all that, and same with dancing, right? It's just
can't fake the funk,
you
dude.
can't fake the funk, man.
You can't fake
It's
the
just
funk.
there. It's just finding that
The
funk.
authentic,
Yeah.
like real recognizes real,
It's,
and that's why like when
yeah, it's
someone is bringing the real self, then people recognize it. You can't fake it.
it's like when you're watching one of those competition shows, like The Voice or something like that, and all these kids have
Yeah.
incredible voices and they have these incredible ranges,
Mhm.
and then the 55-year-old background singer comes out there and
Yep.
lays waste to the room because
Mhm.
she is or he is just, it's all that experience, it's all the pain, it's all the ups and downs of that long career, it's everything like that. All of
Mhm.
that stuff is coming through the vocal. It's all the
Yeah,
ancestors,
you
it's
can't fake
everything else.
that.
And you just start crying and you don't know why. It's because it's so real what has happening in front of
Right,
you.
exactly. That reminds me, like, I'm a huge fan of PJ Harvey, and
Mhm.
I remember, like, the first time I heard her demos for Rid of Me, and it's just her and a guitar,
Yeah.
and I was, like, stopped in my tracks, like, "Who? Wait, what?"
She's
Like,
incredible.
and it was
Yeah. Yeah.
incredible, and, and again, not quote unquote "perfect,"
Mhm.
but incredible because it was authentic. So, yes, authentic. I love how you said that. Authenticity over perfection.
Yeah.
I'm gonna file that away in my brain. But I was going to say that, yeah, like the fear of failure, that definitely can cripple me. Like I'm the type of person that if there's a project or like work stuff that I need to do that's like more involved, a lot of the times I have to think about like I sit there and I get stuck on like what does the end result need to look like, and then like it's like I'm like walking around the end result of like how do I get there,
Mm.
and I have such a hard time. It can really paralyze me sometimes of like instead of just going okay pick a direction and go, it's like I'm like constantly hung up in the process of like where do I start,
Mm.
and so I get that. I
Yeah.
get that. I'm working on that. But I love what you said about the authenticity and just sometimes it's just start somewhere
Yeah.
and see where it takes you,
Yeah.
right? Like the failure is the part of the steps to success. Like it's and Yeah. Anyway, and
100%. Yeah.
the other thing that really helps me is it's that shift from it's the shift into growth mindset, right?
Yeah.
It's from the fixed mindset,
Right.
which is like I'll never learn, and into growth mindset, which is like it's learning is part of the process and the failure is part of the process, and trying to figure out, I can get better with time and energy and all that, where you're going for better and not perfect.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
That's such an
huge.
important runner. Go for when you get in that fixed thing where you feel stuck, like you get to what's the growth? How can you flip it over to the growth
Just what's the
mindset?
next step?
What's the
Yep.
next step? What's the next step in the
Yep.
chain? Yeah, good one.
Yep.
All right, comparing yourself to others is our next one here. Believing that everyone else is more capable or deserving of success, leading to feelings of inferiority. And I think Teddy Roosevelt is usually quoted as or credited as saying, "Comparison is the thief of joy." And whether he said it or not, I think it's one of the truest sentences there is. Because everybody's on their trip, man, and I really sounded like a hippie when I said that. Everybody's on their trip, man. Sorry.
Yeah,
But
dude.
everybody is. Everybody's on their trip, man. And but we have this terrible habit of comparing our trip to theirs, and it was like, it's natural, I guess, wanting to know how you're measuring up to somebody else who's doing something that you're doing or somebody you wish you were or whatever. But what we don't see is everything that's happening behind the scenes that's made someone's success possible, right? We only encounter the finished product. It's not the 10,000 hours of practice. It's not the sacrifice. It's not the self-doubt. It's not the luck. There's a lot of luck involved. It's not the nepotism in some cases. There's a lot of that going on, right? It's all, it's not the myriad challenges they face on their way to the goal. It's very easy to dismiss all of that and just focus on the shiny product, right? But the shiny thing is not the point, right? The journey is the point, and everybody has a different journey. And so comparison starts to look ridiculous after a while from that perspective, because I was certainly guilty of this in my early dance career. I was far too interested in how other dancers' skill and success was, and not concerned enough with finding my own voice in that dance. And then, instead of trying to make something better than someone else, these days I just focus on the authenticity of it. It's just like, am I just being myself? And that short circuits the comparison thing, because what makes something special is the person, not the product, I think. And I may not be the most skilled dancer or podcaster or teacher, but I am always the best at being me. And if I tie my colors to that mast, I don't get into the comparison game. There's nothing new under the sun anyway, right? So the only thing that is truly unique is the way you interpret it through your own personal singular lens, I think. And that's what I shoot for now.
I really dig that.
Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, it's the whole like, don't compare your blooper reel with other people's highlight
I
reel.
love that saying that you have. You say that quite often. I love that. Yeah, always.
Right. And I've heard one time as well, it was don't compare your chapter 1 to someone's chapter 10.
Yeah, that's
like,
very true.
Yeah, that's like a really good one. Whenever I scroll social media, I try to keep that in the forefront of my mind in particular. I mean, I always try to keep that in the forefront of my mind, but again, social media is a part of so many people's lives and it's so pervasive. So I try to just have that in the forefront, because so many people mistakenly use social media content, it's hyper curated often and methodically planned and orchestrated and performed and,
funded.
And people look, and funded
some money
and,
behind it
and
sometimes,
like to make it look like it's effortless or whatever. And so many people use that, like common people use it as a metric for a quote unquote successful life, right? Like, what's everyone doing and what do I need to be doing in order to, and that's exhausting. And it's a road that leads to nowhere good. So essentially, like when you're looking at like someone else as a successful life, you're just setting yourself up for failure and misery. Essentially. Anyway, the other thing is, like, with social media, we have access to some of the most skilled people in the world at their craft. And so if I'm like, here's a perfect example. There's like this 8-year-old kid who's like a music genius that I follow on social media. And he is like a little 8-year-old Mark Ronson producing incredible music, just like has perfect pitch, can hear music. Like he's like Duke Ellington reincarnated.
I think I've seen this kid.
And it's so impressive. And I look at it and I'm like, well, I quit. Because, and I know I shouldn't be doing that. I should just be like finding the things that I want to do and not looking at the best person who is like one of the best in the world at this stuff, because I just need to be, what am I better at?
Yeah.
Like I'm comparing myself now to the person I was yesterday. Did I pick up a new craft, and am I learning something that I didn't know yesterday? Or
Yeah.
did I get better at something that I was better? That's focus on that, on who you were yesterday. If you're doing better than that version of yourself, then you're doing fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so with this social media thing that you mentioned. It's such a double-edged sword. You have to have your mind right if you're going to spend any time scrolling, period. Or that scroll can turn into a mental spiral of comparison and shitty self-talk. I think what you alluded to is true. You can't compare your everyday to somebody else's highlight reel, for sure. And, when you're talking about that kid, it's so funny it's so funny when we compare ourselves to like children or people younger than us, because I mean, I think one of the most beautiful things in about being older is recognizing other older people and how much of their pain and how much of their experience and how much of their love and loss and grief that they bring to life now. It's this, they're like this rich garden.
There's depth.
There's depth there, right?
Yeah.
And they're like a beautiful garden sometimes, of just all this experience. And especially the ones who have experienced all that and come through it with not a negative attitude, with not a cynical, thing taking over their lives, but rather the people
there's wisdom there.
Yeah, there's wisdom and there's equanimity about it, and like it's gorgeous. And when you do art of any kind, the artists that bring that to it are the most authentic and the most beautiful thing. Even if you don't care for their vocal style, like say Tom Waits, that's not everybody's cup of tea, but Tom Waits brings himself to every performance. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Or Bob Dylan or anybody like that, or even
I just think of like Mark Lanigan.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
His voice.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Right? Like
or you think about the Pogues, I mean, Shane McGowan or somebody like that, I mean, there's dozens of them. There's dozens of them, but those are the ones we love because you can hear all of that come through, or see it in somebody's paintings or in somebody's dance or whatever, beautiful, man.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. Shall we move forward?
Yes, that's okay. Right. Next one. Attributing success to external validation, right? Seeking validation and approval from others to feel worthy or competent. And this brings me back to one of our favorite quotes, man, from the Rick Rubin book, right? This should just be a t-shirt for us, right? The audience is last, right? What you create is between you and God. If people love it, great. If they don't, great. Like Vincent van Gogh didn't stop painting just because he wasn't popular or didn't sell any paintings during his lifetime. I wish he did, man. But the only person you should be worrying about pleasing is yourself, really. And that's hard to do, man, because even though I work on it, I still get caught in that sometimes. But I think it comes back to at least partially to the authenticity thing that we've been harping on here. And the things that you create that reflect who you really are should stand outside of judgment by the world, right? Of course, I'm talking about creativity because I'm an artist, but I would say that any kind of approval seeking from the outside, whether you're a hot dog vendor or the president, it's just insecurity making you needy, and who can blame you for that in this digital hellscape of judgment we all live in right now? I mean, just look at the kids,
Don't
like
read
we
the
said,
comment section.
Yeah, right. Kids, just like the kids, like we said, they're petrified of being dragged or canceled for expressing anything outside the agreed upon script, man. It's poison, and it's killing our individuality, and not to mention our creativity that we had, if we ever had it.
Everything you said, spot on. And it makes me think of like, there can be really good pop, right? Like, I mean, look at Prince.
Yeah.
I mean, amazing. There can be great pop, but I don't even think that Prince wrote for the audience, like first and foremost. I feel like if people are creating for the audience first, it's almost like, well, you're in marketing.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
That's really what that is. Like, create to be authentic, don't create to be a marketer.
Yeah.
Anyway, when it comes to creating, I'm learning that creating for approval or validation from the outside world, it rarely makes for good work. There are only a handful of people that can make, I think, like off the top of my head, that can make really good work that is for pop culture.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to please all the people all the time and still remain authentic. So you might as well dig in deep and pay attention to what you're curious about, or what you want to say and do, and how you want to say and do it. And I've realized that some of the most talented dancers and creators and artists that I've encountered have some of the worst imposter syndrome.
For sure. Yeah.
Like even in my dance, like when I was in my dance career, when I was dancing all the time, there were some really amazing dancers. And then like when I would kind of get up close and personal with them, I could see that they were just terrified of looking, of ever failing on the, or like making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And it really that was like what drove them to get better. But that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's like needy, right?
Yeah.
And it's a big old, I don't know, it's a turnoff in so many ways. I don't mean just like in a sexual way. I mean like in just like your energy is a little overwhelming with your neediness of like feeding the ego, right? So everyone has varying degrees of imposter syndrome. It's like, again, just do your best with what you have. And that's all that matters, really. And understand that practice and healthy competition and humility and a growth mindset are what sustains us in the long run in developing all of our skills.
Yeah, I think about those kids who are influencers now who are real popular, or people who are seeking to get famous and they have this mindset of outside, having to have, verification of their talent from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens when they're not, everything has a shelf life, man.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
when I first started my dance career, I thought I'm going to do this forever. Like, listen, not when it ceases to be popular, you're not when you can't make any more money at it, you're not
when there's a pandemic.
Not when there's a pandemic, you're not. All those things, right? So what happens to those? What happens to those people mentally when something steps in and says you can't, or maybe you have a diagnosis, or maybe you have maybe you break a part of your body that you can't, ends your career. Like I think about these kids who are planning on being NFL stars and get hurt in their first season and can't play anymore. It's like that destroys people who are looking for outside validation for who they are, right? So again, I got to go back to like, you got to get for me, I had to get my mind straight. So if that happens to me again, because it was devastating when I lost my dance career for me. I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't ready for it at all.
Right.
And had I prepared for, the fact that everything doesn't last forever and not getting so much validation from outside, then I probably would have been mentally better off when that did happen.
Paul.
Yes.
You should go back and listen to our pivoting episode.
Yeah, I should. I'm learning so much.
You just pretty much explained that whole episode.
Yeah. No,
but it's true because we wrap our identity with these particular things, and we, and with our identity, it can be like, oh my God, I'm not good enough, and that's the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Sinks right in, and it really screws us up. So again, be aware of it. Know that everyone's got it.
Yeah.
Everyone, and just try your best. And if it's not enough for the person that you're trying to deliver to, then you just kind of have to take the lose, take the loss, and take the L, and just figure out, all right, well, how can I do it better next time, or what did I learn from this?
Right.
I have a whole thing of like, don't waste your pain.
Yeah.
Like, don't waste your pain.
Failure,
make it into wisdom.
Failure is feedback.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And that's hard. Yeah. I get that. I'm not saying that like I'm perfect at this, and I'm reminding myself of this as much, but you have to move forward. You have to put one foot in front of the other. You have to try your best with what you have.
Agree.
And that's going to be different each day, and it's going to be different with each person.
Yeah. Agree. Okay. Let's get on to overcoming imposter syndrome a little bit. We got, so we talked about what now. Now let's talk about, first one on this list is acknowledge your feelings, which is usually what we talk about as first for anything, right? Recognize that feelings of self-doubt and imposter syndrome are common and normal. Like we said, avoid dismissing and suppressing these emotions. Instead, acknowledge them and understand that they do not define your worth or capabilities, right? So this falls under the old chestnut, whatever you resist persists, which is one of my favorite things to say to myself, because so often I find myself in a resistant stance, and I have to break it down and just like, you got to go with this, man. So I think we often try to push things away, push things and thoughts away that are unpleasant. And while we may suppress them temporarily, they have a habit of returning over and over again until we acknowledge them and deal with them, right? And that was part of what we talked about, shining the light on things before, right? That's part of acknowledging them. Acknowledging and naming your fears and anxieties is the first step in dissipating them, I think, and shining a light on what scares us and stops us obsessing over the things that are, quote unquote, wrong in our lives, redirects us into treating ourselves with more compassion, which I think is key to getting over this thing. Yeah.
Yes, and. No, I was going to say that, I don't know if you know this, but I stole a little mind trick from you, a little mind hack, if you will. Whenever I recognize that my like self-doubt is creeping in, and the imposter syndrome's, rearing its stupid, ugly head, Um, I listen to the voice that's trying to convince me that I'm not enough, and then I respond to it with a simple bullshit.
Yeah, that's my
I don't
trick.
know if you remember
Yep.
telling me about
Yes,
that,
I do.
but yeah,
That's my trick.
yeah. And like with that, like challenging that little stupid, shitty inner voice that like will tell us that we're not enough. And when I'm like bullshit, then it's like that. I kind of give myself a little pep talk, and I kind of take my power back, and I look for the evidence that the work I've put in, or the wins that I've taken, or the work that the stuff I worked hard for.
Yeah.
And I double down on the mindset, and it's like that whole don't need to be perfect to validate myself. And that is a process, but it's, I start it with like challenging it with bullshit.
Yeah. And that's a good one, man. I mean, call it what it is, right? Bullshit, mind turds, demons, whatever you want to call it.
Mind turds.
Mind turds. That's what I call it, right? However you want to frame it, man. But naming it takes its power so you can move on, and this perfectly fits into to what we have next. But I wanted to say that, Sharon and I were walking along, my ex partner, girlfriend, were walking along one time, and I was just the period when I had a very stressful job in a startup in Silicon Valley, and I was facing a very difficult issue with that work, and I was kind of going on about it, and she turned to me and she said, "Yeah, but you're Paul Overton, God damn it." And I was like, yeah,
yes,
I am Paul Overton, damn it. And I was like, and I still hear,
Paul Overton.
right. I still hear that sometimes, I kind of put it in Sam Jackson's voice instead of Sharon, but,
Whopper Royale with cheese.
Exactly. Add a little.
Do you have a wallet that just reads badass motherfucker?
Yeah, just add an MFR in there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, what you said about the bullshit thing is it really goes into the next thing we're talking about, which is challenging your negative thoughts, right? Practice cognitive reframing by challenging negative self-talk. And again, I think this goes way beyond the scope of imposter syndrome and into every aspect of our lives. I used to have a lot of negative self-talk inwardly, and outwardly too. I used a lot of self-deprecating humor, and my current partner, Kat, actually brought this to my attention, just how much I had a tendency to put myself down. And this is recent. This is like 2 years ago. It was a real wake-up call for me, and it's taken time, but now I'm at a point where I don't even have those thoughts about myself anymore, and I've really been able to curtail it. What got me there, Kat actually helped me a lot by serving me like gentle reminders while I was trying to work on this. And whenever I would use self-deprecating talk, she would just say, don't talk about my partner like that. And I love that. And that really hit me every time, and we've done it for each other, because she had a self-deprecating side to her too. And we're both much better at negative self-talk now. It just doesn't happen for us. It doesn't occur to me. And I'll tell you, it's really opened me up that words make a difference, man. And they do. And the words you say to yourself make a big difference. And that was and much bigger than I probably thought before I started doing that. So that was a real wake-up call for me.
Yeah, it's yes to everything you just said. The way I look at it, like your thoughts become things. Your thoughts become the words, and words become actions, right? And so I know we talked about this in the altered states, or altered
states episode. Yep.
Yes, thank you. The meditation is like that really allowed me to get that space to be aware of when I had that shitty inner voice. And, I still have it occasionally, but it's dissipated a bunch because I've become aware of it. And when I do, I do that thing where I'm like, you don't get to talk about my friend Nora like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it's almost as if like if someone were to talk about like one of my closest friends or my mom at this point, where I'm like, nope, like we're not doing that. Let's get back to a healthy mindset. Like I can catch myself when I'm doing that more often. I don't always nail it, but I'm a lot more there's a lot more self-compassion now because I can catch that quicker. But yes, the other thing I was going to say, I think is kind of brilliant when I realize that like some major artists have, I think it's like out of their imposter syndrome, where they'll have like an alternate, like an alter ego. Like I know Beyonce has like Sasha Fierce.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like I think it's like the like sassy, kind of fierce, part of her or that she's
Cary
probably.
Grant. I mean, Cary Grant was the perfect. He was just a made up dude.
Yeah, like that's the thing. It's you can kind of like call on yourself as like a third person, like don't talk about Nora like that. Like as if you're protecting a friend or something.
Sure.
I think, or that you want to bring out a part of yourself that like you feel like you have the imposter syndrome. like think of it as like a third person or, a third party.
Right. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that a
I
lot.
dig that.
Okay, next one here. Celebrate your accomplishments, right? Take time to acknowledge and celebrate your successes, no matter how small they may seem. And some people keep a journal of this type of stuff. I don't keep a journal because I'm lazy, but I do. I keep a notebook.
I just have trust issues.
Right. Well, there's that. I keep a notebook for ideas and stuff, but I don't keep like an acknowledge my wins journal. But I do acknowledge my W's, man. And I start my day by putting all the things in the W column that I can think of. And that you can call it a gratitude practice. I guess that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
But, I'm a little bit allergic to the word gratitude these days just because of its overuse. And I don't just think of it as wins just in my own head. It doesn't matter. Use it, don't use it. I don't care. But they're always like, I wake up, I'm alive. Awesome. W. I'm loved. Yep. W. There are people and animals that I care about. W. I have food and shelter. W. And so I'm already winning before I ever go to work in the morning. Before I ever get in the shower, before I ever meditate or anything like that, I've already won the day because I've got all these W's and no L's. There are no L's in that column. I'm alive. I'm healthy. I'm loved. I have a dog. All this stuff. I have a great partner, incredible podcast partner.
That's right.
Yeah, all that.
Award winning.
Award winning.
Cross my fingers with that one.
Right. Anyway, yeah. So I like to start with that. But
I love that.
What I don't do is I don't try to hold on to any single accomplishment in my mind for too long, right? So I'm fine with celebrating my W's, but I don't want to then linger there because then it feels like I'm living in the past and not living in the present and getting onto my next task or goal that I've got happening.
Right. I think like the thing with the number one, celebrate every win.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because life will hand you a lot of losses and you're going to need those wins to anchor you of like, all right, I got some under my belt because again, life can throw some massive curveballs.
Sure can.
But that reminds me of like the whole high five yourself in the mirror kind of thing. And like, I love
do that
stuff.
every morning
like,
too.
I love it. That's great. I'm a little too tired in the morning where I'm like, I need coffee.
Yeah.
But I try to remember that. I try to like, just like I am alive. The gratitude is really what anchors me with so much in my life. But it's like I said, I've done my husband and I do our top 3 every night of like, our top 3 wins or the top 3 moments that felt like a win. And it really does it. And here's the thing, when you do that, when you celebrate your wins, you're wiring your brain to look for more wins.
Right.
You're wiring your brain in a way that's going to make you happier and more grateful and more, what's the word? Engaged.
Anything you prioritize and bring your consciousness, your attention to, you're going to get more of that thing, right? Or your brain is going to look for more of that thing. So I think what you said is really important to just emphasize that more. It's like it retrains your brain to look for the W's, and not linger on the L's.
Yep, that's been my primary focus with therapy and with like the past several years of my life is trying to find the spots where I'm like, oh, I don't like this pattern thought, this pattern thinking, where I'm like recognizing it. I'm like, how do I change this for a better experience in my life? Because that's really what it's all about, right? Like, it's not about every trophy or whatever. Here's the thing. Every time you get acknowledgement about either your hard work or your accomplishments, it's like accept it with grace, and then you go forward. Otherwise, you're going to be like that dude from high school that's like, remember that time we won the championship game, and like no one, 40 years later, you're like, come on, dude, So don't hold on to stuff. Like recognize it, be grateful, and then get back to work or like get back to learning. Really, the growth.
And we talk about let's go to the next section. I got something to say about that, but let's do the next section here, which is set realistic goals, right? Avoid setting excessively high standards for yourself and break larger projects and goals into smaller manageable tasks. And we also mentioned this on another episode because it's sort of central to, staying sane a lot of the time. I don't think there's anything wrong with a challenge. Let's just say that, but getting the balance right, is important, right? The goal is to wind up in your growth zone, like you talked about before, which is beyond your comfort zone and it's beyond your fear zone. So you have to get through those two to get to that growth zone. But you want to stop short of your overwhelm zone, which is where you've bitten off way more than you can chew and you're in way over your head. Now, you may feel like you're going to be in over your head, and that may be a story. So you have to talk to yourself about that, right? But you're shooting for that growth zone. And I think that because humans are naturally expansive and we love a big project, that we'll often overload ourselves with big goals and high standards at the same time, which is a recipe for disaster sometimes. And progress really is the answer here, right? The only goal I have is to be incrementally better and more authentic than I was yesterday. I make sure that all my goals just serve those two things. And then I can focus on progress and growth rather than whatever the outcome is, right? A lot of spiritual traditions talk about this, right? In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna that about karma yoga, which involves doing your duties without attachment to the fruits or actions, which are the outcome of those duties, right? And he's essentially saying that work is its own reward, and Lao Tzu also has something to say about it in the Tao Te Ching, and it wouldn't be one of our podcasts if I didn't mention Lao Tzu, right? What can I say, man? He was a wise dude, Anyway, he said it very simply. He said, do your work and step back, the only path to serenity, which I think is just like, it's so decisive and so true, right? Do your work and step back. Write a book, right? That dude should write a book. He should write a longer one. That one is too short. He was too concise. We need more Lao Tzu. Yeah. No, it's a beautiful book. Yeah.
I still have never read that. I need to get on that.
Do it. It'll take you an hour. Do it.
I know. Or it might take me a lifetime.
Yeah.
So
it'll take you both. Yeah.
Both. It'll take me both. Yeah. No, what you said about like the chunking things out, I'm still learning that process. And, it's the way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time, But yeah, the way to run, so this is not, I swear to God, this is not a pat on my own back.
Uh-huh.
I've run 3 marathons and
ooh, look who's run 3 marathons. No, just kidding.
Let me also say the reason I've run 3 marathons is not because I'm I want to run, and if you run marathons, good on you. If you run distance, all that stuff, good on you. You do you. The reason I ended up running my first marathon was because one of my oldest and closest friends, her father, who was like a second dad to me, was dying of cancer. And it was really rough because I felt powerless. And so my husband, Kevin, had run his first marathon the year prior, and I'd been there to cheer him on. And if you ever want to get filled up by humanity, go and spectate at a marathon. You'll see so much inspiration. It's amazing. The vibe is great. Anyway, so my friend's father was dying of cancer, and he basically, I was like, all right, I'm going to run a marathon and raise money for the American Cancer Society in his honor. And so I basically, it was super overwhelming because no one just runs out the door to run 26.2 miles. Good luck with that. And you have to train. And so thankfully there was a whole training program that chunks it all out for you. And it's, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time, a lot of effort. But I just told people I'm going to do this, and I try to stay as true to my word as possible. And so I basically started with my 3-mile run, and then it was a 5-mile, and then it was a 7-mile and a 10-mile, and so on and so on. And you just kind of build up and into the pacing. And quite honestly, the hardest part of the marathon is the training. And the marathon itself was really enjoyable because you're kind of riding on the high.
You trained,
you put in the work.
Yeah.
And so, am I trained like a Kenyan? Did I run like a Kenyan?
No, you're not trying to win the thing. You're trying to raise money for cancer, right?
Right. But I'm doing a thing to complete it, to challenge myself. And I was in the growth zone, and I could have been in the overwhelm zone easily, but if I had allowed the imposter syndrome to say you can't do that.
Yeah.
But it's just one of the more enjoyable, fulfilling things that I've done in my life, and that really I'm proud of, and I'll take that win. And when they hand you a medal when you cross the finish line, you earn that.
Yeah.
It's no one's gonna go no, I didn't run it first place. Take the damn medal. And that's what I mean that literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
So yeah.
When I did karate, it was that way in belt ceremonies. We had really hard tests that would last all day long. Right? They would last from the morning until sometimes it was dark, and you would get home absolutely depleted. And when I was doing karate, I was already in my 30s, man. So I was kind of old to be
Yeah.
starting that thing. But when I got through my first belt test, especially, it was like, wow, yeah, take the W, man, because you trained for this
Yeah.
and you made it through. You know,
And you might get your ass kicked a little bit on the way too.
yeah, you
Like,
get your ass kicked daily on the way
yeah.
to that thing. Yeah, for
Yes.
sure. Yeah,
Yes.
no
I
question.
trained capoeira, and I basically earned my green cord, which
Mhm.
essentially meant like, okay, everyone have at it, you can kick her ass.
Right. Yeah.
But still, I earned that. I
Yeah.
trained for that.
Yeah.
I'll take that win. I wasn't like the best capoeirista, but I trained,
Hey.
so and I earned a belt.
Exactly. Me too.
There you go.
All right, next one
Yes.
here. So seek feedback and support. Don't be afraid to ask for feedback from colleagues, mentors, and trusted friends. And this one comes with a lot of conditions for me, but I do use it. And here's how, right? So you have to trust yourself first, I think. At least for me, I do. I have to trust myself first. I always believe that I have the answers inside me, and I need to exhaust my search for them internally before I go to the outside to seek counsel from anybody else, right? So a lot of the times, I think in my younger years, I probably would have thought, yeah, well, I don't feel good about this. Let me ask somebody else right off the bat before doing like a full inventory inside me. I was like, wait a minute, maybe I do know how to handle this thing. Having said that, there is a time for asking people what they think, right? But the trick, I think, is you have to ask the right people, right? You don't ask a race car driver how to build a boat, right? That's not what you, and a lot of times I think people just ask random friends what they think that may not understand what they're trying to accomplish or why they want to accomplish it, what their opinion is about it. And it doesn't make sense. And yet we do it all the time. You have to make sure that you're checking in with somebody who can actually be helpful, not just somebody that you like, I think, or else, you could end up down some dark alley and doing something that doesn't work with what you're trying to do. And just because you asked the wrong person about it, it's not a good situation.
Yeah, a few things. First off, I had this little vision of you going inward and like you're like typing in a little Google search to yourself before you ask anyone.
That's pretty much it. I'm going with the internal AI. I'm going my own chat GPT
Your own
brain.
search engine inside.
Yep,
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
No, exactly. I was going to say I would never ask feedback from my mechanic friends about the meal I made. I would ask my chef friends, right?
Yeah.
About like the feedback and give me some notes. But the other thing I was going to say about what you were just talking about is the flip of that is also like there are going to be people who give you unsolicited feedback.
No question.
Right? And that is the other thing. Like you don't have to accept that either. The amount of people who will chime in to give you their 2 cents when you didn't ask for it. That drives me nuts.
I never. I will tell you right off the bat. I never accept it.
Exactly.
I will not accept it because I didn't ask you. And like, actually, one of my things I've been working on in therapy is a very big sort of thorn in my side around that issue, and it comes from my upbringing, and it's and maybe this is it's a Gen X thing too, right? Like we were left alone when we were kids, right?
Yep.
And that was a great childhood in one way. And it was
terrible in another way.
very lonely, terrible childhood in another way, where we were left completely to raise ourselves, right? So when our parents then tell us to do something, or right, we're like, screw you, man, you weren't here, or give us their unsolicited opinion, like you weren't here my whole childhood. Like, how do you think you have the right to tell me how to do this now? So I mean, I'm working through those things, but it's very valid though. I mean, it comes from trauma, right? It comes from the trauma of being a trauma of abandonment and things like that. And that's when I really suffered from a lot. Yeah.
I really, that's definitely a trigger thing for me. And it's probably the Gen X childhood stuff. I mean, there's
For
plenty.
sure.
And I know I really don't want to sit here and talk about cancer again.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
but this is my experience. But like when I was like going through chemotherapy, I didn't wear a wig. I just walked around bald. It was very clear that I was going through some shit, and it was authentic to what I was going through. The amount of people that would offer, I mean, strangers even, unsolicited advice. I had a guy stop me in Whole Foods. I was just trying to get groceries, man.
Yeah.
He stopped me in Whole Foods and basically he went through my grocery cart to tell me what I should get rid of and what I was like, and I kind of scoffed at him. I'm like, oh, are you a doctor? And he's like, no, I work for American Airlines, but gut health is my passion. And I was like, oh, Lord. Right. And like I had heard that this can happen to patients, but like I was like kind of standing there in the middle of the Whole Foods, just kind of gobsmacked. It was so ludicrous. Yes, and
Oh my
so
God.
I forget. I'm sure it was just like my face was just like both
I mean,
horrified and amused. But
how
yes,
do you not just laugh in somebody's face who tells you gut health
Oh,
and
I did.
compassion?
Oh, I
Oh,
absolutely
did you?
did.
Good,
He
good.
actually said to me, no, I shit you not. He said to me, he's like, because he was like, how are you feeling? And I was like, I'm doing all right. I'm like, coming to the end of my chemotherapy or whatever. Like,
Yeah,
it was like
yeah.
the last month of it. And he was like, I'm sorry, but I would rather die than go through chemotherapy. And I was like, well, I'm going through it to not die.
Right,
So
exactly.
there's that little, but people have all sorts of opinions when they've never experienced that. It's why I don't give parenting advice to parents, because what
Right,
the hell do I know about parenting?
right. Yeah,
So anyway, again, people are going to give you unsolicited advice. You don't have to take it.
yep.
You can just tell people to piss off if you want, or one of the things my dad was a master at, like, deflecting this type of shit without, like, it just, like, if someone says something like what you should or shouldn't be doing, as simple as that, right?
Is that right? Yeah. Oh, is that right?
Right.
Oh, or
Because
thanks for
then they're
that.
like,
That's what I
yeah,
do now. Thanks for that. Oh
or
man, thanks for
you
that.
give me something to think about.
Yeah, yeah, all that
That's all you
stuff.
got to do,
Yeah,
and
man.
walk with the way.
A lot of people have ideas about what I should do in my shop, or when you have something that's front facing like that, everybody comes out of the
Hmm.
woodwork and it's like, oh, it'd be great in here, or you should have music in
Oh
here.
yeah,
Oh, do you ever think about doing a class in here?
they
Like,
all think
oh
they're being
man,
helpful.
I hadn't
Yeah,
until now, but thanks for that feedback. And then no, screw
yeah.
you. Not, I
You
mean, not
really give
screw
me
you,
something
but
to think about, Paul.
yeah, really give me something to think about. Ooh, and I won't think
Yep.
about it for a minute after this. Anyway, all right, let's get on. Challenge the myth of perfection, which we all talked about a little bit. But you will always think you could have done better, right? Me, you, Mozart,
Mhm.
Einstein, we've all looked at something we've done and think we could have done it better. But it's the wise ones who can put that away, I think, and just get on with it. And because I like the idea of beautiful imperfection. I like the idea of progressive imperfection, all those things. And we learn from our mistakes because we learn from our mistakes way more than our accomplishments, basically. And losing always teaches you more than winning, even though it's unpleasant, usually is. Failure is feedback, and the process is where growth happens. So there's no reason to feel incompetent when you make a mistake. This is life school, man. And it's full of failures and victories and everything in between. So
Yep. Yeah.
yeah.
And even if you fail, tomorrow's going to come and it's going to be a new day anyway. And, you have a new opportunity to figure out what that is. But I also wanted to say that, like, I think a lot of us can beat ourselves up with the, like, shoulda, couldas when
Shoulda,
we
coulda.
don't
Yeah.
hit the mark.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, hindsight is always 2020, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't know that. You, like, when you're faced with a challenge or you're faced with a task and you're trying to figure it out, of course you're going to look back on it with new, fresh eyes of what could have happened
Sure.
when you fail at it,
Yeah.
because that's the lesson, right? That's the lesson right there. You don't
Right.
have the lesson beforehand. So move forward, don't ruminate on the losses, and don't beat yourself up with the shoulda couldas. It's a useless pursuit to
Yeah, one
sit
of
there
my
and figure.
favorite things to say to myself is stop blaming yourself for what you didn't know when you didn't know it.
Yeah. Oh,
Right?
and
I
it's
mean,
like the whole
that's the
don't
whole
should all over yourself.
yeah, well, yeah, but that's
Yeah.
the regret thing too, right?
Yeah.
That's not just imposter syndrome. That's all the regrets you have about relationships and
Hmm.
how your parents and all these missed opportunities, all this regret stuff. Like you didn't know when you didn't know, and now you
Right.
know. So good, now
No
you know.
regrets, man.
You know
No
regrets. You
regrets.
didn't know when you didn't know though. So stop blaming yourself for that. Stop shitting on
Yeah.
yourself for that
Yep.
part of it. All right, next one. Focus on your strengths. We're almost done with this list here. So let's focus on your strengths. So I used to think that in doing anything, the information you were trying to communicate was what people cared about, whether that was like a job or as a teacher or so, a teacher's a job, but you know what I mean? A dance teacher, I mean, in a corporate job,
People are gonna come for you,
I
dude.
know they're going to come for me. I'm talking about intelligent people and then also teachers. No, I'm
Oh
kidding. I'm
boy.
kidding, man. I
That's
am
Paul,
one. Come on,
not
come on.
Nora.
I've always been a teacher, so I
I
did
know.
not mean to say that. That was just a slip of
That
the
was
tongue there. All right.
facetious.
It was facetious, right? So it turns out anyway, they're much more interested in the way it's presented to them than in the information, right? So you don't have to be the best in any business. You don't really need to be. You just really need to be authentic which is what we've been talking about, while you're settling into whatever you're doing, and gaining experience. And people have lots of strengths, but the one they forget, I think, is being themselves. And you probably got hired wherever you are for your attitude, if you have a job where somebody hired you, for your attitude and personality as much as your skill set. That happens all the time. Just look at how good some people are at their jobs. They're learning them. You can tell they're learning them on the fly. But if they have a great attitude, that's way better for a company to have somebody with a fantastic attitude than it is to have a great skill set with a crap attitude, right? So your greatest strength is always going to be you. And to lean into that, I think is one of the ways that starts to have a cessation of this imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I think everything you said is spot on, and I will also add that like the failure part of learning how to fail or gracefully, I guess, is part of how you build resilience.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people who are just too afraid. Like look at like trying stuff and not hitting the mark all the time as part of building your resilience.
Yeah.
And you're going to need that resilience in life. And so like if you don't try, you're not going to be able to like strengthen up for when life really is like handing you some shit. So
that just reminds me of this. I'll tell you briefly. I was in a blues singing class with Brenda Boykin, who's a fantastic blues singer. We had her at our camp a bunch of times, and it was at the jazz school in Berkeley. And I thought, I want to go learn from her. I always wanted to be a singer, but as you know, Nora, my junior high school teacher, Mrs. Chin, when my voice was changing, she told me, fucking Mrs. Chin, she told me not to sing, and that ruined it for me. And I thought I couldn't sing. And so here I am, an adult in Brenda's class, and we're going to have a performance at the end of it. And I thought, okay, and I'm doing okay. I'm like, I figure out that I can actually carry a tune. And I'm like, oh, this is all right. So we're supposed to write our own blues songs, right? So I write my song and everything, and we get down there and I just lose it. I mean, I lost it. The first note's played and I was like, I don't even know where the first note is that I'm supposed to be. I have no idea. And everybody's sitting down there, and it's a restaurant full of people, and everybody's doing great and killing their songs. And it was the longest 3 minutes of my life. I just completely
bombed.
I mean,
you should just go into stand up then.
Yeah, I might as well have been naked as well, because it felt like that, man. I mean, it just felt like the worst thing. But what a great formative experience for me later. I mean, in the moment, all that night, I think I was distraught for 3 or 4 days after that, but it got me to go back to it and say, look, no, wait a minute. That's an experience. You can do that thing. You proved it in class. You just couldn't do it in that context. Yeah, so let's go back and see if we can do that again. And, and when I had my bands later on, I did some vocals in those bands, and they were good. They were fine. That's
awesome.
Not great, but they were fine. And they were in key and everything like that.
They were good enough.
They were good enough. Yeah. And it was great. So anyway. All right, let's move on to the last one here on our list, which is seek professional help if needed. And when is it not needed?
Yeah, exactly. That's what you need it.
Yeah, it's no secret that I'm a big therapy fan, and you are too. And I've experienced some massive improvements in my life because of it. Yep. And a lot of the things that we talk about on this show are the result of unresolved trauma, including imposter syndrome. And the best way to get at that is through therapy, in my opinion. And I'm never going to recommend therapy. I'm never not going to recommend therapy for anyone. It's an amazing thing,
Yeah, I co-sign on that. Yeah.
Co-sign on that. Thank you.
Co-sign.
Thank you. Thank you for co-signing on that.
Yeah, and I'll say with the therapy thing, like, number one, I know that at least in the States, that it can be difficult to find therapists and afford them. And
we've both been through a bunch of therapists, though, right?
Yeah,
before we
that's
found
the other
the
thing.
ones that we love, right? Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. Like, if you find a therapist first try, good on you, but that's not typical. You really, it's. I don't want to say it's like dating, because people will be like, I'm not going to look for a therapist. It's like dating in the best way, but it took a few tries, but it's so worth it. And like I found a therapist and the type of therapy that it deeply resonates, and it's amazing for me because I can feel the growth. Like I'm witnessing the thought processes and like how I communicate to people, and even just putting myself out there, where before I was not as confident in that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's just like one of the first things that my therapist asked me when we were first, like kind of meeting each other, and she asked me what I wanted to get out of therapy, and I just said I want to learn the different ways that I get in the way of myself. And I saw her kind of like smirk, like kind of not like a laughing at me, but like oh, she gets it.
Yeah.
So it's like imposter syndrome is definitely one of those ways that I get in the way of myself.
Yeah.
And like I probably never would have thought about releasing a podcast prior to the type of therapy. That would have paralyzed me. So this in itself of just me getting on a mic and talking to my friend Paul about all these different things, to whoever is listening. I don't even know who's listening, but
yeah, I agree.
I would have not done that prior to the therapy I'm doing. So I can see and feel the growth. Anyway, you were about to say something.
No, I was going to say I just agree. I don't think either of us would have had the courage to be as vulnerable as we have now chosen to be on this show a few years ago, right? I mean, I feel like I can talk about anything and it doesn't bother me now. I'll talk about anything from, drugs to sexuality about myself. It doesn't, I'm just in the business of being me now, but I don't think that that certainly wasn't the case for most of my life. Most of my life, I had a lot of reservations about doing that kind of thing. And I think therapy has given both of us the courage, as much as anything else has, to be ourselves, be more authentic, and take the knocks that go along with that. Because there's definitely, as soon as you start being yourself, all the haters come out of the woodwork.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. Yes, they do.
They do.
That's just
the other thing our therapists say both, I think, that I love is like, sick people don't like it when you get well.
Yeah.
And that's what you got to remember when the haters come out. Sick people don't like it when you get well, baby.
Drinking that haterade.
Yeah.
No, I was going to also say that if you don't feel no one feels innately confident. And if they claim to be confident, they're just actually either ignorant or arrogant, right? And the confidence comes in with the doing, right? And so if you don't feel confident, just dip your toe in the water towards like where you want to go or what you want to build for yourself, and just try and keep trying. But like that's where the confidence comes and the resilience comes. With the failures they're part of the process. To get to whatever your goal is.
Yeah.
So
Great. All right. Well, let's bring this thing in for a landing now. It's time for final thoughts here. Now, for me, for my path, for me, I try to follow a really simple formula, and it goes like this: awareness, which is always first, right? You got to know your inner voice, know when your inner voice is being a jerk and making you feel less than, and then acceptance, right? So accept that this will probably always be there in one way or another, right? So again, I'm not trying to eliminate anything in my life anymore. I'm just trying to mitigate whatever. If it's a negative thing, I'm just trying to mitigate its influence on me, right? I'm not trying to push it away, because I think resistance and persistence is a real thing. And so trying to eliminate things like that, they might come back at you harder. So I don't try to do that. I try to be aware of it, accept it, and then compassion is the third one. Try to be as kind to myself as possible as I work through the emotions that come up and redirect negative self-talk into positive affirmations. That's a big one for me, right? And then embrace the imperfection that is the result of anything that I do, right? Lay down my perfectionist tendencies and focus on good, authentic work, and that's it. And the last thing is keep working on myself through therapy, meditation, and whatever means bring me closer to understanding and accepting who I am. That's basically the list for almost anything that I deal with, not just imposter syndrome. How about you, Nora?
Yeah, that's great. I think you pretty much nailed everything. And the only thing that I would add is, again, you're going for better, not perfect, and to again try to switch from fixed mindset to growth mindset. The fixed mindset being like, I'll never be able to do this, or like, I don't have growth. And growth mindset is like, I'll figure it out.
Yep.
Along the way.
Mindset's everything.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Great. Awesome,
right.
man. Well, we've done it again.
Yes. And Paul, I love you.
You got me.
It's a competition.
I got you last time, but you got me this time. I love you too, Nora. Thanks for listening, everybody. All right. We'll see you next time.
Later.
Freedom over fame. Freedom over cycle stays the same.
If you'd like to get in touch with us about anything you've heard on the show, please feel free to drop us an email at ifweonlyknewthenpod@gmail.com.